Emily was a young college student living alone in a small apartment in the quiet town of Ohio, United States. Her days were filled with morning classes and afternoon work, often keeping her out until late at night. At 22, she enjoyed her independence but also felt the loneliness that came with living by herself. Her modest apartment was nestled in an old 3-story building, surrounded by peaceful neighborhoods. Emily appreciated the privacy her apartment provided, but lately something had begun to disturb her. Whenever she returned home after a long day, an inexplicable feeling of being watched followed her. Initially, Emily chalked it up to stress and the overactive imagination of a tired mind. She would often laugh at herself for getting spooked by shadows moving in her peripheral vision or feeling shivers as she climbed the dimly lit stairs leading to her apartment. However, over time these feelings intensified. It was as if there were hidden eyes behind curtains, waiting for her late-night return every evening. Emily tried to distract herself with college and work, but the sensation persisted, subtle and unsettling. Sometimes, she swore she heard soft sighs when she entered her apartment, or silent footsteps that ceased immediately as she turned towards them. These events left Emily in a constant state of unease, affecting her sleep and her focus on daily tasks. She began locking every window and door with obsessive care, checking them repeatedly before going to bed. Yet, the feeling of vulnerability only grew, as if an unwelcome presence was creeping closer. Despite her best efforts to maintain a normal appearance during the day, Emily found herself frequently looking over her shoulder at night, when shadows danced in the faint light of street lamps on empty streets. She started to wonder if she was truly alone in her apartment, or if someone else had found a way in unnoticed. This was just the prelude to the terror that was about to unfold in her otherwise peaceful and solitary life. Weeks passed, and the sensation of being watched started to become more than just a mild unease for Emily. It was as if invisible eyes were following her every move around her apartment. Sometimes, as she got ready for bed, she swore she saw shadows moving in the corner of her eye, but when she turned to look, there was nothing but her own reflection in the misty bathroom mirror. Nights became the worst time for Emily. Closing the apartment door behind her sent a shiver down her spine. She began locking and relocking every latch, even though she knew she had already done so. It was as if she was defending herself from something unseen, something she could feel but not see. Every now and then, as she crossed the darkened living room toward the kitchen for a glass of water, Emily thought she heard a soft sigh behind her. A cold shiver ran up her spine as she spun around quickly, only to find emptiness and silence. The sound of her own footsteps became a paranoia, a constant reminder that she was not as alone as she would like to believe. In these moments of tension, Emily started noticing small things out of place in her apartment. A book that seemed to have been moved slightly from where she left it, the kitchen window that appeared to be open a crack more than she had left it the night before. Small things that could easily be dismissed as forgetfulness on her part, but fueled her growing suspicion that something was amiss. She tried mentioning these feelings to a few close friends, but they just reassured her, attributing it all to her stress and accumulated fatigue. However, Emily knew something was not right. The sensation of being watched was not just her mind playing tricks on her. It was a visceral foreboding that someone was invading her privacy, stealing her moments of peace. Every time she returned home at night, the tension escalated. The apartment, once her safe haven, began to feel like a trap of anxiety. Emily started to question her own sanity as she tried to navigate an existence that now seemed clouded by shadows and suspicion. One night, returning home after a long day of work and study, Emily noticed something different. As she turned the key in the front door lock, she had a distinct feeling that she wasn't alone inside the house. A shiver ran down her spine, causing her to hesitate before slowly opening the door. Upon entering, the silence in the apartment was oppressive. Emily stood still for a moment, listening intently. That's when she heard it. A step. Soft, almost imperceptible footsteps echoing from somewhere within the apartment. Her heart began to race as she tried to rationalize the sound, searching for a logical explanation. All the windows were closed and locked. The doors were all as she had left them, but the footsteps continued. She forced herself to move, cautiously advancing down the hallway toward the living room. Every sound seemed amplified in the stillness of the night, until she abruptly stopped upon turning the corner. There, standing in the dim light, was a shadowy figure. A tall, dark man whose eyes reflected a light that wasn't there. Emily felt ice in her veins as she realized she wasn't imagining things. Someone was inside her home. The intruder didn't immediately move, observing her with an intensity that sent chills down Emily's spine. A moment of terror froze time as she tried to think quickly. In a desperate impulse, she turned and ran towards the basement, where she hoped to find some form of safety. As she descended the stairs, the sound of hurried footsteps following her confirmed her worst fears. Emily reached the basement and locked the door behind her, trembling as she pulled out her phone to call the police. She could barely breathe as she described the situation, pleading for help while listening to the increasingly loud noises of the intruder attempting to force the door open. Time seemed like an eternity until the blue and red lights of the police illuminated the basement. Emily let out a sigh of relief mixed with fear as she heard the voices of the officers ordering the man to surrender. In a mix of shock and horror, she saw the face of the stalker as he was finally handcuffed and led away by the police. It was her neighbor from next door, someone she occasionally greeted in the hallways or on the sidewalk. He confessed to watching her for over a year, meticulously studying her schedule and habits to find the right moment to invade her space. The revelation was a devastating blow to Emily, shaking her sense of security and trust in the people around her. After this horrific incident, she knew she could no longer stay in that apartment. Emily moved to a new city, determined to start her life anew in a place where fear and paranoia could not follow her. The experience left deep scars but also strengthened her resolve not to let the terror of the past define her. And so, she departed, leaving behind the place she once called home, hoping to find peace and safety in an uncertain future. Emily trembled as she pressed her back against the basement door, hearing the heavy footsteps of the intruder approaching rapidly. Each thud against the door made her heart race even faster as she struggled to stay calm enough to speak to the police on the phone. Minutes felt like hours as she waited, hearing the noises growing closer on the other side of the door. The intruder seemed determined to reach her, moving with an urgency that sent shivers down Emily's spine. She held her breath, praying that the police would arrive in time. Suddenly, there was a loud crash and the door shook under the impact of a blow. Emily screamed in terror but continued to press her weight against the door. She knew she couldn't let the intruder in, couldn't allow him to reach her. "I'm down here. Please hurry," Emily shouted into the phone, her words coming out in a breathless whisper as she struggled to keep calm. The sounds of struggle continued from the other side of the door, followed by the muffled voices of the police. Finally, silence fell. Emily stayed still for a moment, trying to catch her breath. She heard hurried footsteps approaching the basement door and, with a trembling sigh of relief, saw the flashlight beams of the police sweep through the dark space in front of her. "It's okay, we're here now," a reassuring voice said from the other side of the door. Emily collapsed in tears of relief, allowing the officers to enter and handle the situation. They apprehended the man, who resisted fiercely before being finally subdued. As the police led him away, Emily stood there, trembling with shock and adrenaline. She looked around at the basement, the place that had been her last-minute refuge, now tainted with the fear she had experienced there. She thanked the officers repeatedly, feeling gratitude mixed with a profound sense of vulnerability. Looking into the eyes of the man who had stalked her for so long brought forth a complex mix of emotions: anger, fear, sadness. How could someone she had superficially known become her worst nightmare? The impact of that encounter would haunt Emily for a long time. She knew that, despite the stalker's arrest, the trauma of that night would stay with her for the rest of her life. It was a stark reminder that safety is fragile, even in the places where we feel most secure. Shaken by the harrowing experience, Emily decides to leave Ohio behind. She moves to another city, seeking a fresh start away from the trauma she endured. The story ends with a mix of relief and horror over what she went through, aware that her life has changed forever. Emily finds a small apartment in a distant town, starting over where nobody knows her and where the past can slowly fade away. The new routine is a blend of relief from immediate danger and profound sadness over the emotional losses she has suffered. Trust in strangers has been shaken, every new face on the street prompting a moment of hesitation, a glimpse of distrust. However, as months pass, Emily finds solace in the normalcy of daily life. She throws herself into work and gradually makes new friends, rebuilding her support network and restoring her faith in humanity. Slowly, the weight of fear begins to lessen, replaced by a determination not to let the past dictate her future. Emily's story doesn't end with a cessation of pursuit, but with her courage to confront the shadows of trauma and find a path to healing. She knows her life changed irreversibly that night, but also discovers an inner strength she didn't know she had. Each day is a step toward rebuilding her security and achieving a new kind of freedom. Emily learned that while terror may leave deep scars, it can also reveal the resilience of the human spirit. And so, she moves forward, turning the horror of the past into a constant reminder of her own courage and ability to survive. If you're interested in real horror stories like Emily's, subscribe to our channel and hit the like button to join us on this chilling journey of survival and strength. Don't miss out on the latest tales that will keep you on the edge of your seat.